My 15-year-old daughter uses a wheelchair. She was rolling through our front gate after a fun day outside. She loves the warm sun and saying hi to neighbors on her way home. It was a bright, sunny afternoon. Then Karen from the HOA walked up fast without asking. She shouted, "No wheelchairs through the main gate. It looks bad and breaks the rules." My daughter said quietly, "I'm just going home. I'm not hurting anyone." Karen got really mad. She grabbed the big heavy gate and slammed it hard on my daughter's hand. My daughter screamed in pain as her fingers got crushed. Her scared eyes filled with tears while she held her hurt hand. Karen stood there and said with a mean smile, "Now the gate looks nice and follows the rules." She looked proud of herself. She did not know the strong man running out of the house toward her was my daughter's father, a Navy SEAL, just home from a hard mission. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me where you are watching from, and please hit subscribe for more stories where the good guys always win. The sunlight glinted off the freshly painted gate, scattering tiny reflections across the driveway as Mia rolled her wheelchair through the front entrance. The warmth of the afternoon sun kissed her cheeks, and she hummed softly, feeling the pleasant breeze ruffle her hair. She loved this part of the day, the gentle incline of the street leading home, the familiar sights of neighbors tending their gardens, the distant bark of a dog somewhere down the block. For Mia, these simple moments were freedom. She waved at Mr. Patel next door, who was trimming his hedges, and he waved back with a small smile. A group of kids on bicycles rode past, calling out greetings that made Mia giggle. The world was golden, soft, and safe, or so she thought. A shadow fell across her path. Before she could react, a sharp, booming voice shattered the calm. "No wheelchairs through the main gate. It looks bad and breaks the rules." Mia froze, her hands gripping the rims of her wheelchair. She blinked, trying to understand who was shouting and why. There, charging up the driveway like a storm, was Karen from the HOA. Her expression was rigid with anger, her jaw tight, and her eyes blazed with a kind of fury that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "I'm just going home," Mia said quietly, her voice almost swallowed by the summer breeze. "I'm not hurting anyone." But Karen didn't hear reason. Her temper flared like wildfire. In a blur of motion, she yanked the heavy metal gate that marked the entrance to the neighborhood and slammed down. Mia barely had time to react. Pain exploded through her fingers, sharp and searing, and she screamed, clutching her hand as it crumpled beneath the weight of the metal. Tears welled instantly in her eyes, blurring the world into streaks of gold and green, sunlight and shadow. Her wheelchair teetered slightly on the uneven pavement, and for a moment she felt truly helpless. Karen stepped back and smirked, her chest puffed with pride. "Now the gate looks nice and follows the rules," she said, her voice filled with satisfaction, as if she had just performed some grand duty for the neighborhood. Mia's vision swam, and she barely recognized the street she had traveled countless times. The pain in her hand was overwhelming, but what hurt even more was the disbelief. How could someone, anyone, take joy in hurting her? She tried to pull her hand free, but the throbbing made it impossible. Then came the sound that changed everything, heavy, purposeful footsteps pounding the driveway. Every thud echoed like a drumbeat of power and authority. Mia's head turned just slightly, and she saw him, her father, muscles coiled, uniform sharp despite weeks away on a grueling Navy SEAL mission. Sweat glistened faintly on his forehead, not from the heat but from urgency. His eyes locked on Karen, blazing with a controlled fury that made the air itself seem to tremble. The gate, the street, the sunlight, all became secondary to the single undeniable fact. Mia was not alone anymore. Karen blinked just for a moment, and it was enough. She hadn't expected anyone to intervene. She hadn't counted on a protector like him. The smirk faded from her face, replaced by the flicker of uncertainty. "Step away from my daughter." His voice boomed, deep and resonant, carrying both command and warning. Each word seemed to vibrate through the air, demanding attention. Karen opened her mouth to argue, to justify her cruelty with rules and regulations. But no words came. Fear, real and sharp, crept into her expression. For the first time she understood that this wasn't a neighbor shouting back, wasn't a passive witness shaking her head in disapproval. This was someone trained to protect, to respond, to act decisively. Mia's tears blurred the edges of the scene, but through them she could see her father moving closer, one purposeful stride at a time. His hands were ready, not just for confrontation, but for rescue. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, a combination of relief and awe. The pain was still there, throbbing and fierce, but the fear that had gripped her moments ago began to recede. She was safe, finally undeniably safe. Karen's eyes darted to the approaching figure. Panic flashed across her face as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. Every command she had shouted, every cruel action she had taken, now met with a force she could not intimidate or manipulate. She stepped back slightly, but the gate remained menacingly close to Mia's hand. Her father's presence seemed to fill the street. Neighbors who had noticed the commotion peeked from behind curtains and over fences. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. And in that suspended moment, Mia realized something profound. The power of protection, the unyielding force of a parent's love, could override fear, rules, and cruelty. Her father reached her side in a few long, commanding strides. Carefully, he lifted Mia from her wheelchair and moved her behind him, shielding her from further harm. Karen's eyes widened with frustration, and she tried to step forward, but the father's stance was immovable, every inch of him radiating control and authority. "You will not touch her again," he said, low, calm, and lethal in its clarity. "Do you understand?" Karen's mouth opened, closed, then remained silent. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. She had been the aggressor, and now she was exposed, helpless before the force she had underestimated. Mia pressed herself against her father, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The pain in her hand was still sharp, still real, but it was now accompanied by a sense of security she hadn't felt in weeks. She looked up at him, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Dad, thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, firm and steady. "Always," he replied. The sunlight reflected off the gate, the street, and the distant houses, but now everything felt different. Karen's smirk was gone, replaced by fear. Mia was alive, safe, and protected, and for the first time that day the world seemed to hold its breath, not in fear but in the quiet, potent aftermath of courage meeting cruelty, and winning. The stage was set, the tension unresolved, and Mia knew that while today had ended in safety, this was only the beginning. The fight to reclaim peace, dignity, and justice was far from over, but she had the strongest ally imaginable by her side. The sound of pounding footsteps echoed like rolling thunder across the driveway, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Mia's heart raced, a mix of pain, fear, and awe tangling in her chest. She pressed her good hand against her bandaged fingers, the throbbing agony from the gate still sharp and unforgiving. She had barely lifted her eyes when she saw him, a figure moving with terrifying precision, every muscle taut, every movement purposeful. Her father, fresh from a grueling deployment as a Navy SEAL, he radiated authority. His uniform, slightly creased from travel, clung to his muscula. Our frame, his boots striking the concrete with the rhythm of someone trained to move decisively. Mia's breath caught in her throat, a mixture of relief and disbelief flooding through her. He had returned just in time. Karen, still hovering by the gate with her hands slightly trembling, froze. Her smirk, which had moments ago dripped with cruelty and pride, faltered. Something primal flashed in her eyes, fear. She realized instantly that she had miscalculated, that the power she had wielded so freely was slipping through her fingers. For the first time, she faced someone she could not intimidate. "Step away from my daughter." His voice rang out, deep, resonant, and uncompromising. The words cut through the sunlight like a blade. Every neighbor who had been watching from behind hedges or windows seemed to hold their breath. Even the birds overhead had fallen silent, as though nature itself sensed the intensity of the moment. Karen opened her mouth to protest, to justify her actions with her usual mantra about rules and appearances, but her voice faltered, catching in her throat. Her confidence, which had so often allowed her to bully, manipulate, and dominate, evaporated in the presence of his commanding authority. He did not shout, did not rage. He simply stood unwavering, a wall of power between Mia and danger. Mia's tears blurred her vision. She tried to speak, her lips trembling. "Dad, it hurts," she whispered, the pain in her fingers now mingling with lingering fear. Her father's eyes softened for only a fraction of a second, a silent acknowledgement of her suffering, before they hardened again with focus. He moved closer with careful precision. One hand steadied the wheelchair, while the other lifted Mia gently but firmly from her seat. Her small, trembling body was now protected in his arms, and she felt an immediate, almost magical sense of safety. Karen flinched. As if struck, her eyes wide, and her usual bravado dissolved entirely. "You are not touching her again," he said, his voice calm but deadly in its clarity. "Do you hear me?" Karen opened her mouth, attempted a word, and shut it again. She tried to raise her hands in defense, in argument, but they hung limply at her sides. For the first time, she had no script, no power, no control. Her voice, her authority, even the rules she had clung to, none of it mattered now. She was confronted with raw strength and absolute determination, and she had nowhere to hide. Mia's small body trembled against him, not just from pain but from the lingering adrenaline of terror. He held her close, his grip firm and unyielding, shielding her from the cruel glare of Karen's eyes. Her father's presence was more than physical protection. It radiated control, certainty, and the unwavering promise that harm would not reach her while he was there. "Now back away," he instructed, his voice a low rumble, almost like distant thunder. "You are done here." Karen's face twisted in frustration, disbelief, and something resembling shame. She tried to speak again, to explain herself, but the words died in her throat. The laughter she often used to mask her intimidation was gone. She was trapped, exposed, and fully aware that she had underestimated the situation. The neighbors, who had been quietly peering through blinds and over fences, began to murmur. Eyes widened, heads nodded, and some even stepped a little closer, emboldened by the sight of the father protecting his daughter with such authority. Karen's power had always relied on fear, on the uncertainty of those around her. Now that power was gone. Mia's father held her steady as she let out shaky breaths, the pain in her hands still present, but overshadowed by the security of his arms. He spoke to her softly, just enough for her to hear over the murmuring of the crowd. "It's okay, Mia. You're safe. I've got you." For the first time since the gate had slammed down, she felt her fear ebb. The tears still ran down her cheeks, but her eyes no longer mirrored terror. They reflected trust, relief, and a newfound sense of courage. She realized in that instant that the world could be frightening, rules could be unfair, and cruelty could exist, but love and protection were far stronger. Karen's attempts to regain control failed spectacularly. She took a hesitant step back, then another, her body language screaming defeat. Her mean smile was gone, replaced with the realization that she had no power here, that the rules she had wielded as a weapon were meaningless in the face of decisive, unshakable authority. Mia's father didn't let his guard down. He held her until the adrenaline faded, scanning the surroundings for any further threats. His eyes remained locked on Karen, warning clear in the intensity of his gaze. No action would be tolerated. Slowly, Mia relaxed against him. The pain in her fingers was still real, sharp, but it no longer dominated her world. The terror that had filled her chest was replaced by the certainty that she was not alone. She whispered, her voice hoarse but steady, "Thank you, Dad." He gave her a small nod, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, though his eyes never left Karen. "Always," he said, firm and resolute, "always." The sunlight shimmered across the driveway, glinting off the gate, the asphalt, and the distant houses. The moment stretched, suspended in tension, before slowly resolving. Karen, powerless and humiliated, finally stepped back entirely. Mia's father adjusted his hold on her, preparing to move her safely away from the gate and toward the house. Mia realized something vital as she felt the solid, unwavering protection of her father. Courage wasn't about the absence of fear. Courage was about facing fear, standing with truth, and having someone you could trust to shield you when danger struck. And in that moment, Mia knew she was stronger than she had ever realized. Mia sat in her father's strong arms, the pain in her fingers still throbbing, her wheelchair forgotten for the moment. Her father held her steady, scanning her hand with practiced eyes, but his attention never wavered. From the figure across the driveway, Karen, the HOA tyrant, had stopped mid-step, her confidence shattered but her defiance stubbornly intact. "You have no right to do this," her father said, voice calm yet commanding, resonating across the driveway. Touching her hand, slamming that gate. "This is assault. Do you understand what you've done?" Karen's lips trembled as she opened her mouth, a desperate attempt to argue, but words failed her. She had counted on intimidation, on rules, on fear to carry her through every confrontation, but she had not counted on the presence of someone like him, someone who exuded authority, skill, and a single-minded purpose to protect. Neighbors, who had been cautiously peeking from behind curtains and hedges, began to gather in small clusters. Their whispers carried through the air, curious and wary, eyes wide as they observed the scene unfolding. Many had experienced Karen's heavy-handed rule enforcement firsthand, and some had longed for someone to challenge her abuses. Now, here she was, exposed and powerless under the scrutiny of both a skilled protector and the entire street. Mia's father placed a gentle hand on her injured fingers, carefully inspecting for serious damage. "It's swollen, but I can stabilize it," he said softly to her. Then he turned his gaze back to Karen. "You will step back and explain yourself, or leave entirely. This neighborhood does not tolerate what you just did." Karen's shoulders stiffened. She took a hesitant step forward, trying to assert control, but her actions lacked conviction. She looked around, realizing too late that her usual tactics, shouting, threats, and aggressive gestures, had no effect now. The neighbors were watching, some shaking their heads, some quietly recording on their phones. Every movement she made was documented, and she knew it. "You can't! These rules are in place for a reason," she shouted, attempting to reclaim authority, her voice cracking with panic. "Wheelchairs, gates, this is about appearances. Everyone knows the rules." Mia's father's expression remained unchanged, calm, solid, immovable. "There is nothing in any rule that gives you the right to harm a resident. You will leave this driveway now. Step away, or I will ensure law enforcement handles you." The sudden mention of law enforcement made Karen falter. Her eyes darted to the neighbors, some of whom were now openly watching with concerned expressions. The realization that witnesses could testify against her shook her. Her confidence, carefully built over years of intimidation, was collapsing. Mia, feeling the strength and safety of her father beside her, straightened slightly. Her fingers ached and her heart still pounded from the attack, but she felt a courage she had not known before. She slammed the gate on my hand," Mia said quietly, but with a firmness that made Karen flinch. "I wasn't hurting anyone. I was just coming home. She hurt me." The words, simple and factual, carried more weight than Karen could deny. Neighboring eyes widened, nods of acknowledgement rippled through the small crowd, and even Karen's bravado faltered further. She opened her mouth, tried to argue, but Mia's clear statement made her words meaningless. The truth, supported by witnesses, had no room for manipulation. Mia's father set her gently back into her wheelchair, and her bandaged hand was supported. Then he reached for his phone, already documenting the scene. Every gesture Karen made, every defensive glance was being recorded. "This is being documented," he said, voice low but audible, ensuring Karen knew she had no escape. "Your actions are being recorded, and there will be consequences." Karen's face drained of color, the color of panic and realization mixing. She had always believed she could manipulate situations, twist rules, and silence dissent. But now she was cornered. Every neighbor's gaze, every whisper, every raised phone confirmed that she could not hide her cruelty this time. Mia, emboldened by the protection of her father and the presence of witnesses, began to describe the incident in more detail. "I was coming through the gate," she explained, her voice gaining confidence. "I said hello to neighbors. I wasn't doing anything wrong. She slammed the gate on my hand. It hurt so much I couldn't move. I was scared." Each word drew attention. Neighbors whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disgust at Karen's behavior. Karen's attempts to interject were met with silence, the community now listening to Mia's truth. The street, once a place where Karen ruled through fear, was witnessing a new kind of authority, honesty, courage, and protection. Mia's father spoke again, directing his words at Karen, but with eyes that swept the witnesses as well. "This is unacceptable. You will apologize and step back. If not, the authorities will be involved. Understand?" Karen's lips pressed tightly together. Her gaze flicked to the small crowd. She could feel the judgment, the disapproval, the growing consensus that she had overstepped her bounds. She took a shaky step back, her fists unclenching slowly, her usual arrogance replaced with the stark reality of defeat. Mia's eyes met her father's, gratitude and relief reflected in the depths of her gaze. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was speaking the truth, standing firm, and knowing that someone would protect you. In that moment, she felt her own power growing, tiny yet undeniable, as the crowd of neighbors silently affirmed her words with their presence. Her father gave her a reassuring nod, his strong hand resting on the wheelchair's handle. "You've done well," he said softly. "You spoke the truth, and no one can take that from you." Karen lingered for a moment, unsure, frustrated, and defeated. Then, with a final glance at Mia's brave, tear-streaked face, she turned and walked away, muttering under her breath but powerless to act. The street, once tense with fear, seemed to exhale collectively, the tension easing into cautious relief. Mia wheeled herself slightly forward, her father beside her, scanning the neighborhood. Witnesses continued to murmur quietly, many nodding at Mia in silent support. She realized then that the fight was far from over. Karen might try to reclaim control later, but for now the first victory was theirs. Courage, truth, and protection had prevailed. And Mia, still trembling but stronger than ever, understood something essential. Standing up, speaking out, and being witnessed could turn fear into power. And even a small voice could command attention, when backed by truth and support. The sunlight glinted on the gate one last time, no longer a weapon but a reminder Today, Mia had survived and the tide had begun to turn. The morning sunlight spilled into the Hart family home, painting the walls with gold and warmth. But the calm of the day was deceptive. Inside, the family was far from relaxed. Mia sat at the kitchen table, her injured hand carefully bandaged, still throbbing from the gate incident. Her father hovered nearby, methodical and precise, gathering evidence. While her mother organized papers and digital files, "This isn't just about today," her father said quietly, eyes scanning over the photos he had taken the day before. "It's about establishing a record. Karen can't manipulate the narrative if we have proof of everything." Mia looked at the pictures he had taken, her swollen fingers, the dented metal gate, the moment when Karen had glared at her with cruel satisfaction. Seeing it frozen in time brought a shiver, but also a strange sense of empowerment. "So, this is proof," she murmured. "Yes," her father replied, gently adjusting her bandaged hand. "Proof that what happened wasn't your fault. Proof that she broke the rules, real rules, legal rules. And proof that the neighbors will see the truth." The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls, camera footage review, and neighbor outreach. Each call carried the tension of uncertainty. Would the neighbors cooperate? Would they remember the patterns of Karen's behavior? Could they be brave enough to speak up? It didn't take long to find the answer. One by one, neighbors stepped forward. Mr. Patel, who had seen Karen intimidate residents over a crooked flower pot, spoke first. "She finds people for things that aren't even real," he admitted, shaking his head. "I've stayed silent too long. But today I saw what she did to your daughter. That's unacceptable." Next, Mrs. Alvarez, who lived 2 houses down, shared her experience. "She stormed into my yard last month, yelling about some rule that didn't exist. I was terrified to call anyone, but I can confirm that she's been harassing multiple residents, and today I saw it myself. She hurt your daughter." Each testimony was another brick in the wall of evidence they were building. Mia listened, heart pounding, as she realized the power of her voice. Her courage, her willingness to speak up had inspired others. The neighbors, who had felt powerless against Karen's authority for years, found their own strength. Karen, meanwhile, attempted to sway public opinion. She walked door to door, flapping her hands dramatically, claiming she was simply enforcing neighborhood rules. "I'm protecting property values," she said, her voice shaking slightly under the scrutiny of the cautious audience. "I'm following regulations. This is for everyone's good." But the tactic fell flat. The neighbors had already witnessed the events, remembered the pattern of harassment, and now had the courage to speak the truth. The words Karen had always relied on, fear, intimidation, and the threat of authority, had lost their power. Her attempts to twist reality were met with silence, polite yet resolute disapproval, and the occasional raised smartphone capturing her antics for posterity. Mia's father compiled everything meticulously: photographs, videos, written statements, even digital timestamps from the security camera at the gate. Each file was cataloged, dated, and backed up multiple times. The evidence was overwhelming, precise, and undeniable. "You see, Mia," he said, kneeling beside her wheelchair, "this isn't just about anger or revenge. This is about accountability. The truth will speak for itself, and no amount of yelling or intimidation can hide it." Mia nodded, feeling a new sense of clarity. Her fingers still throbbed, but the pain was now accompanied by empowerment. "So, she can't lie about me?" she asked softly. "Not this time," her father replied. "Not with all of this." The next day, the Hart family sent a formal report to the HOA board. Every piece of evidence was included: the photos, the statements, the video footage, and a detailed account of the incident. The report was concise, factual, and uncompromising. Legal language framed the narrative, emphasizing assault, intimidation, and violation of HOA rules. Meanwhile, the community buzzed quietly. Neighbors who had remained silent in the past now began discussing the situation openly. Conversations over fences, whispered chats at the local park, and messages exchanged through neighborhood apps all centered on the same truth: Karen's behavior could no longer go unchecked. The tide was turning, and Mia realized she was part of that shift. Her voice mattered, her courage mattered. Karen, sensing the walls closing in, grew increasingly desperate. She tried to call the board, attempting to preemptively justify her actions. But the board, having received multiple witness statements and evidence, requested a formal meeting to review the incident. Legal counsel advised documenting every step, and Karen's every attempt to spin the story was meticulously countered by the Hart family's records. Mia's mother watched her daughter with pride and concern. "You're brave, Mia," she said. Do you know how many people stay silent, afraid to speak up? Mia's gaze shifted to the window, watching neighbors going about their day, some offering small nods or waves of encouragement. I think I understand now, she whispered. Speaking up, it can make a difference. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. Exactly. Courage isn't just about facing fear, it's about taking action, even when it's scary. Today, you've helped more than just yourself. You've helped this entire neighborhood. By evening, the house felt calmer. Mia rolled over to the window, letting the fading sunlight wash over her face. Her hand throbbed, yes, but she felt stronger than she had before the attack. She had survived fear, had spoken the truth, and had inspired others to do the same. The shadows lengthened across the driveway, and in the quiet, the hum of a neighborhood slowly waking to the possibility of justice filled the air. Karen's reign of intimidation beginning to crumble, and Mia understood something profound. The smallest voice, backed by courage and truth, could ignite change. As night fell, Mia's father sat beside her, reviewing the evidence once more. Tomorrow the HOA board meets, he said. They'll see everything. And Karen, she'll finally face the consequences. Mia nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion, relief, and anticipation. I'm ready, she said softly. We're ready. And for the first time in days, the Hart family, and perhaps the neighborhood itself, felt the fragile but undeniable promise of justice taking root. The morning of the HOA board hearing arrived like a storm on the horizon, tense, heavy with expectation, and charged with anticipation. The Hart family drove slowly through the quiet neighborhood, Mia in her wheelchair, her bandaged hand resting gently on her lap. The sun glinted off the freshly paved streets, but there was no warmth in the air today, only the weight of the confrontation that awaited them. Inside the HOA meeting room, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Long tables were arranged in a rectangle, the board members sitting stiffly, papers and laptops open before them. A projector cast documents and photos onto the wall, highlighting evidence that had been meticulously collected by Mia's father. Photographs of Mia's crushed fingers, video footage of Karen slamming the gate, and written statements from neighbors, all displayed with precision and clarity. Karen sat at the far end of the room, her usual posture of superiority faltering. The board had already received multiple complaints against her, and her attempts to intimidate staff and residents were met with polite but firm refusal. Today she was not in control. She fidgeted, tapping her fingers against the table, her eyes darting nervously toward Mia, toward her father, toward the mounting evidence projected across the R. Mia's father, calm and composed, positioned himself beside her. He exuded a quiet authority, his presence commanding attention without a single raised voice. He had rehearsed every detail, anticipated every possible lie Karen might utter, and prepared the documentation to counter it. Every click of the projector remote was deliberate, each slide revealing facts that could not be disputed. The hearing began formally. The board chairwoman spoke first, her tone neutral but firm. We are here to review a serious complaint regarding HOA member Karen Lewis's conduct. We will consider all evidence, witness statements, and legal obligations before rendering a decision. One by one, the neighbors stepped forward. Mr. Patel recounted the intimidation he had faced when Karen fined him for trivial landscaping rules. Mrs. Alvarez spoke of repeated harassment and her fear of speaking up. Each testimony reinforced a pattern of abuse, showing Karen's repeated misuse of authority. As they spoke, Mia felt a wave of pride and relief. She had inspired these neighbors to speak their truths, and their courage strengthened her own. Then came Mia's turn. Her father adjusted her bandaged hand gently. It's okay, Mia, he whispered. Just speak clearly. The truth is your strength. Mia took a deep breath, her voice steady despite the lingering pain in her fingers. I was rolling through the gate, she began, eyes locked on Karen, and I said hello to neighbors. I wasn't hurting anyone. Then Karen slammed the gate on my hand. It hurt a lot, and I couldn't move. I was scared. She smiled, like she was proud of hurting me. Silence filled the room. The weight of her words, plain and honest, reverberated across the walls. Board members exchanged glances. Karen's face twitched, the color draining from her cheeks. The audacity she had wielded for years had finally met undeniable truth, and for once she had no defense. Mia's father spoke next, his tone measured but unyielding. The documentation before you shows the assault on my daughter, Karen Lewis's repeated harassment of neighbors, and multiple violations of HOA rules. This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern of intimidation and abuse that cannot be tolerated. He clicked through video, evidence, the gate slamming down, Karen's hands on the metal, Mia's startled reaction, all unfiltered, undeniable. He presented a timeline of complaints, photographs, and witness statements, every detail aligned, every account corroborated. The room was saturated with facts that could not be disputed. Karen opened her mouth to speak, to offer excuses or spin her actions, but the board cut her off. "We have reviewed your prior warnings, letters, and complaints," the chairwoman said firmly. "Your behavior today and in the past demonstrates a clear abuse of authority. There is no justification for the harm caused to a resident." Karen's eyes flicked toward Mia, then to the neighbors who had come forward. Panic flickered across her face, real, undeniable panic. She had built her power on fear and silence, but the crowd's collective truth had stripped her of that power entirely. She was exposed, her credibility destroyed, her influence evaporating. The board deliberated briefly. Their verdict was precise and uncompromising. Karen Lewis was immediately suspended from all HOA duties, her authority revoked indefinitely. Furthermore, due to the severity of the assault, law enforcement would be notified to consider potential criminal charges. The decision was final. The room released a collective sigh, the tension dissipating into relief, validation, and a sense of justice restored. Mia felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, pride, and a quiet triumph. She had been terrified, in pain, and vulnerable, but her courage, combined with her father's meticulous preparation and the support of the neighbors, had made a difference. Karen's reign of intimidation was over. Her father knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "You see what courage and truth can do?" he asked softly. "You faced fear, spoke up, and inspired others to do the same. Today you made a difference, not just for yourself, but for everyone in this neighborhood." Mia nodded, her eyes shining. The pain in her fingers still pulsed, but it was now accompanied by empowerment. She had learned that justice could be achieved when truth was clear and when people stood together. Karen, escorted out by security, cast one last glance at Mia, a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and humiliation. The smirk she had worn for years was gone, replaced with the stark awareness that her power had crumbled. The neighbors, once silent and cautious, now shared knowing glances. A quiet camaraderie formed through shared courage. As the Hart family left the building, Mia rolled her wheelchair forward, her father close behind, mother's hand gently resting on her shoulder. The sun outside felt warmer, the air lighter. Today was more than a victory over Karen. It was a victory for truth, courage, and community. Mia understood now, deeply and viscerally, that fear could be faced, that injustice could be challenged, and that even the smallest voice could carry immense power when supported by determination and honesty. And for the first time since the gate incident, she felt the weight of safety, dignity, and justice settling over her like a soft, reassuring light. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the suburban neighborhood with soft gold and warm pink hues. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, carrying with it a sense of calm that had been missing for weeks. Mia rolled slowly through the front gate, her fingers flexing carefully in the bandage that still protected her healing hand. The metal gate, once a symbol of fear and cruelty, now seemed ordinary, almost gentle. In the late afternoon light, she waved at Mr. Patel, who was trimming his hedges with meticulous care. "Hi, Mia," he called, flashing a small, genuine smile. In response, she grinned, the kind of grin that felt full-bodied, deep, and victorious. A group of kids rode past on bicycles, some calling her name and waving. Normally, such attention might have embarrassed her, but today it felt affirming, almost comforting. She was part of the world again, safe in her space, free to participate without fear. Her parents followed at a short distance. Her mother's hand rested lightly on the wheelchair's handle, while her father, still broad-shouldered and commanding, even in casual clothes, kept a watchful eye on the street. There was no tension, no fear, only protective presence, a gentle vigilance born of love. Mia could feel it, a quiet reassurance that anchored her in the moment. As she rolled further, Mia reflected on everything that had happened. The memory of Karen's sudden cruelty, the slammed gate, the sharp pain, the terror in her chest still lingered. Her hand had hurt, yes, and the memory of those moments brought a faint twinge. But the pain no longer dominated her. It had been replaced by a deeper understanding of courage, of resilience, and of the power that truth and support could carry. She thought about the way her father had appeared, like a force of nature, strong, composed, unwavering. His calm authority had transformed the terrifying moment into a turning point, one that had not only protected her physically, but had given her a model of courage she would carry forever. She realized that bravery didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply stood firm, quiet and unyielding, and the world adjusted around it. Mia's gaze drifted to her neighbors, many of whom had come out to observe the afternoon. Some waved, others smiled in quiet acknowledgement, their trust in the neighborhood slowly rebuilding after the tension and fear that Karen had sown. The small acts of community, once overshadowed by intimidation and rules wielded as weapons, were now more visible, more cherished. She understood that courage was contagious, that King Up could inspire change beyond what one person could imagine. Rolling along the sidewalk, Mia noticed the subtle differences in the neighborhood, the way people spoke to one another more openly, the absence of whispered tension, the quiet restoration of normalcy. Even the gate, once a threatening obstacle, now symbolized something different. It marked the threshold to freedom, to safety, to a community finally beginning to heal. Her mother knelt beside her wheelchair, adjusting the blanket draped over Mia's legs. "You've grown so much through all of this," she said softly. "I know it's been painful, scary, and unfair. But look at you now. You're strong, brave, and unafraid." Mia smiled, her heart warming at the words. "I think I finally understand," she said. "It wasn't just Dad who protected me. Speaking up, telling the truth, letting people know what happened, that helped too. Everyone mattered." Her father stood behind, arms crossed loosely, his gaze sweeping the neighborhood, calm but alert. "Exactly," he said. "You and your voice changed things. The neighborhood saw the truth. They witnessed your courage. And Karen, well, she's no longer able to manipulate anyone here." Mia looked toward the distant street, where Karen's house stood quiet, her former presence now muted and irrelevant. There was no anger in Mia's gaze, no desire for revenge. Instead, she felt a sense of closure, a knowing that the threat was gone, that justice had been served, and that the neighborhood could breathe freely again. The afternoon stretched lazily, the sunlight softening as it dipped lower toward the horizon. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and Mia rolled her wheelchair to a familiar spot near a tree, resting for a moment. She tilted her head back slightly, letting the sun warm her face, and listened to the subtle symphony of life around her. The rustle of leaves, distant log, tear, the faint hum of a car driving down the street. It was ordinary, yes, but in that ordinariness, there was peace. Her bandaged fingers itched slightly, a reminder of the past trauma, but she flexed them carefully, testing their strength. They were healing, and so was she. Every scar, every twinge of pain, every tear shed had led to this moment: safety, understanding, empowerment, and connection. She felt a deep, satisfying sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with victory over Karen and everything to do with the inner courage she had cultivated. Her parents watched her with quiet pride, their protective instincts slowly relaxing into relief. They had faced fear alongside her, helped navigate danger, and now bore witness to her resilience. Mia rolled her wheelchair slightly forward, waving to neighbors she had never spoken to before, feeling a newfound confidence blossom. Smiles returned, greetings were exchanged, and she realized that trust, once fractured, could indeed be rebuilt. Mia inhaled deeply, the sweet scent of grass and flowers mingling with the warmth of the sun. She understood something profound: safety and peace weren't just given, they were earned, cultivated through courage, support, and the willingness to stand up against injustice. And in this moment, as shadows lengthened and the sky glowed with the colors of evening, Mia felt it fully. The neighborhood, once tense and divided by fear, was healing. Karen's influence had ended, her cruelty contained and exposed, and Mia, rolling slowly along the familiar streets, finally understood the quiet power of truth, the unshakable strength of family, and the resilience that comes from courage. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, the world felt entirely hers, safe, vibrant, and full of promise. She smiled, relaxed against the gentle grip of her parents' guidance, and whispered softly to hers, "Alf, I'm safe. I'm strong. I'm ready for anything." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long golden streaks across the streets, the gate, and the trees. The day faded into evening, but Mia's sense of peace remained, a steady, unwavering light, shining brightly in a world that had once felt so dangerous. And in that light she rolled forward, confident, free, and whole.